Happy New Year. Today, we're going to look at a game between Grandmaster Igor Nataf, rated 2596 at the time, versus several time French champion Eric Prie, who was rated 2513 at the time. Prie played d5, the Scandinavian, uh, opening that is kind of on the borderline of respectability. At top levels, you don't really see it that often. Every now and then you'll see they tried it out there, but it's kind of one of those openings relegated to the play and things like that. Nevertheless, it's playable. I don't like it personally, but that's just more of style than it just being a bad opening. I just don't like the fact that you lose time in the opening. So e takes d5, queen takes d5, and this is what I'm talking about. The queen comes out early, and then knight c3. So white gains a clear tempo with development on the queen. Now, an interesting question to ask is, if all of these things are so, why does black allow this to happen? After all, black's a grandmaster also, and there's probably several different answers, but one of them is that it is very important to destroy the center of your opponent. And sometimes, if you can destroy a central pawn, it's worth losing time, so to speak. This principle can be seen in the Petrov's defense also. Say after e4, knight f3, knight f6, d6, and we see black willing to lose some time here to establish this knight and to destroy white's pawn center, or his e4 pawn rather, because this knight often is not able to stay. For a while it will stay, but often it has to move. There's some old lines where the knight was kept there with f4 and things like that, but later on that knight eventually has to waste time moving back. But for the price of the central pawn, it's sometimes worth losing a bit of time. You see this idea also, this idea of losing time to win this central pawn. You see it in the Berlin defense. We see white ahead in development, but black takes the risk. Right, he's willing to lose some time here in order to destroy white's center. And then we go into the famous Berlin Wall. So I just want to show you that real quick, to show you that the center pawn is viewed with great importance. And sometimes if you can destroy that pawn without too high of a price, then you should go ahead and do it. That's one of the main ideas behind that. And one of the things that Aaron Nimzovich also said in a book that I refer to quite often in my system. So here you have a similar concept here, where the central pawn is so important to black that he's willing to destroy it and give away some tempi with his queen. So whether this is acceptable or not is up for debate. Practice has shown that the opening scores, not too far away from other openings with black. So as far as your modern defense or Alekhein's defense or something like that. So it's not like a disastrous opening for black. But again, those statistics are usually including games from a lot of weaker players and such. And I'm sure black scores a lot of wins from this type of opening due to the aggressive piece play. But at top level, the statistics would definitely probably be more skewed to a high percentage in White's favor. So here after e4, d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5. Black is willing to lose time to get rid of the e pawn. And knight c3 is played. One more thing I would like to say about that concept is I think that concept that particular concept in this opening of bringing the queen out to d5 to capture the pawn like that is I think it's based on a flawed idea and outmoded concept, which basically again Nimzovich argued against in his great debates against Tarish, is that the classical school of chess often placed or overemphasized rather the importance of having the pawns or the physical occupation of the center rather than the control of the center. So I think that, for instance, in this opening, Black is so happy to be destroying that actual occupation of the pawn in the center that he puts his position in some jeopardy by having the queen exposed so early. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about the physical occupation of the center, but it's the control over those squares. The reason why pawns are good to have in the center is because they're the least valuable pieces, right? And they don't have to really yield too much if attacked by stronger pieces, a knight or bishop or queen or something. You can lead the pawn there. You can fortify it. So that's how chess was built. It's based on having the pawns actually occupying the center. But later on, it was shown that the control of the center and not necessarily the occupation of the center was important. So I think that this opening, which is one of the ancient openings in chess, with e takes d5 and queen takes d5, is based on that what I believe is a flawed premise that the pawn, in this case on e4, is that important where it has to be where Black feels he has to give up time in order to destroy it. Because now look what happens. White's pawn is gone, but after knight c3, he still has influence in the center because the knight, by its movements, has great influence on those squares. There's the other pawn, knight f6, bishop d2, and these games usually play themselves. The pieces kind of tell you where they go, and again, this queen is going to have to lose more time because of this future attack. And I always talk about opposition when I go over games. The queen is going to have to move because you have a piece of high value, which is in this case is the queen on a5, opposed by a piece of lesser value, which is this bishop on d2. Prie throws in bishop g4, and this is intended to have some type of disruptive effect on Black's development. On White's development, for instance. So he would be tempted to play the move f3, which is played here. Now, knight f3 can be played. F3, there's several choices here. F3 is played, and now the most natural square, I prefer knight f3. But after knight f3, the idea play knight c6 and continuing to put pressure on d4 here. But the tactics are in White's favor because after, say, knight d4 with the attack on the d4 pawn, remember this knight is pinned, a move like knight b5 unveiling an attack on the queen. Queen b6, right, with more pressure here. c4, and the game gets really sharp. Bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes, knight takes, queen takes, check. And this position with these two bishops will go on to favor white. The two bishops in the open position, and white has a good advantage here, as he will play g3, and then let's say after castles, queen side, just bishop g2, knight d6, and black can either castle himself, white can castle himself, play rook c1, b3, or he can just snatch this pawn with bishop takes a7. So knight f3 is good, but f3 has a different idea, which is to gain more time against the misplaced, or he's arguing that the bishop on g4 is misplaced, and run up the king side with g4 and moves like h4 and things like that. So bishop at f5 is played, bishop c4, queen b6. So we see the queen moving again. Again, this bishop here is menacing. The queen moves again. There is an attack on here, but again, it's not a realistic attack, because soon as this queen comes down here to b2, then rook b1 will take over the line and capture this pawn. And also, black has to worry about his development and safety of his king. g4, gaining more time. Now the game gets really sharp here. g5. And now black is sacrificing, white is sacrificing a pawn here. So there's another queen move. This time he takes the center pawn. Remember what I said about taking a center pawn if you can, if the price to be paid is not too high. So here, Prie decides that the price is not too high to eliminate white's center pawn. After all, if he can consolidate the position and legitimately have control with the center with his pieces, the pieces that remain afterwards, he'll be in good standing. Queen e2, protecting this bishop, and with the idea of castling queenside. And of course, the knight is still attacked. Queen h4, so he stops the queenside castling, and king f1. So again, let's take a moment and think about what I said about the center earlier. Now, those pawns are going from the center, but look at the piece influence over the squares. So you had this knight, right, along with this bishop controlling the dark squares. So even though there's no pawn in e4, this knight cannot go to d5. And even if this pawn, which is influencing e4, of course black provoked it, but even if this pawn was still back on g2, this squares are still being contested here. But in this case, the knight, bishop, and queen piece would be able to land on e4. But since black provoked this pawn advance to f3, that square is guarded. So we could see that even with the pawns missing, that the pieces do an adequate job of controlling the central squares. So knight h5. And this has the threat of playing knight to g3. Check. And notice the rook is kind of immobilized here. But white has something up his sleeve. Remember, white has moves too, and tactics will favor the better developed player. In this case is white. Notice the position of the black pieces all on the king side and on the h file, in particular, while white's pieces are in the center. So he follows the old maxim by countering a flank attack with the attack in the center. And here we see the c7 pawn coming under scrutiny. Only move here is king d8. c6 doesn't work because of knight c7. Knight a6 is not going to work because of the simple capture. And king d7 is just a real suspicious move that is met by bishop b5 check, and then say after knight c6, and just simply rook d1, and then there's all type of discoveries that will be taking place shortly against the king here. So for instance, e6, and then you just throw away a piece like that, and then you just pick up the queen right here with the discovery. That's why opposition is so great. So you see in this diagram right here, we see the bishop, knight, and rook all in front of the king. And you would say, well, the king is pretty safe. But as I showed you in this fantasy variation right here, how quick things can change. Notice the moves of force. Knight b6 is check, threatening to win the rook. He has to take. And now, next thing you know, the queen is gone. All due to the simple tactic of opposition. So back to the game, king d8 was played. Next move was f4. Why f4? Well, Nataf wants to bring his knight to f3 and bamboozle the queen. So Prie goes along with his plan. Knight g3. And all I have to say about this is that you can't attack with one or two pieces. You know, you have to have your forces involved in the attack. That's why, like, if I was actually sitting over the board, I would you can realize immediately, especially when you've been playing chess a long time, that certain attacks are just dubious. Because look at all the pieces on the back rank for black. It's like there's no way this can work. I mean, of course, there's a small percentage, you know, of games like that where the player doesn't develop and seems like it's violating the laws of chess. But there's always, you know, something about it that allowed that tactic to go through when it looks like it shouldn't have. But for the most part, when you see the player with no development attacking, or his pieces are like not coordinated and just trying to attack, look for the answer, because usually there's very simple solution or tactical refutation right in front of you. You know, just don't be intimidated because of the player's rating or whatever, or just because he pushed the piece down real hard or something like that. You know, because sometimes players try to intimidate you. They put make the move real quick, hit the clock, and walk away. And you see them talking to their friends. Then in your mind, you be like, man, he must have seen everything, because the way he's acting. Sometimes that's just a hoax, or sometimes that player doesn't know any better. He thinks he did a good move, but it's just nonsense. So here we see knight g3 check, and it looks great. You're forking the king, queen. Wow. You say, wow, why would a grandmaster allow his queen and king and rook to get forts? So there has to be something to it. Again, look at the state of development. Look at the state of the pieces. Ace takes g3 is forced. It's not only forced, but it's a natural move. Queen takes h1. So now you see this queen way in the corner. No other pieces develop except this bishop right here. We see all of white's pieces in the center. You see? So again, we go back to the question of the center again. What black eliminated the pawns, white's pawns in the center, but black eliminated white's pawns in the center, but white is still dominating in the center with his pieces as a replacement. See, you can put the pieces in the center or the pawns in the center. So just because somebody removes your pawns from the center, don't think that your control or influence over the center is destroyed. It's all about having the influence in the center. So we see here as the queen takes on h1, is sidetracked on this journey. Queen e5 is made. Again, another central move. You see how white is just operating in the center. Doesn't matter that he has pawns there or not. He's using the pieces in the center. So instead of a pawn being on e5 and d5, he has a knight on d5, queen on e5, bishop on c4. nothing has changed except that black has lost time, overvaluing the importance of the pawn on e4 at the beginning of the game. And again, I don't want to, disrespect the Scandinavian opening because again, black's loss is not due, because of the opening. But what we can say that is factual is that this opening doesn't really hold the respect at the top levels as we see, the Roy Lopez, Sicilian Nightoff, and such. And it's not just because of preference either, because some openings are still very strong, but it's just because of taste that they fade off the scene. For instance, like Roy Lopez, Shigorin variation, for example, still very solid and everything like that, but it's just that today's GMs rather play something different. Same with the Marshall attack. The Marshall attack is respected. It's just that GMs avoid it. It's white. They play a lot of anti-Marshalls, things like that. But the Scandinavian is not played because it's not viewed in is with as much respectability as those other openings. So again, at the Queen E5, we see white operating in the center, right? Again, I'm trying to show you in this game that the pieces can be effective in the center. It doesn't always have to be pawns, pieces. So this move Queen E5 threatens really simple. Queen takes C7. How to stop that? There is no way to stop it, right? Except to lose large sums of material. For instance, knight a6 loses, the bishop takes a6. Then rook c8 is forced, right? Losing large sums of material. So Prie played knight d7, right? What else? So queen takes c7, check, king e8. And then the next move is real simple. If you want, you can even pause the video, but I wouldn't even pause it because queen takes b7 is real simple to find, just attacking the rook here. And there's really nothing that black can do. If he tries to save the rook, for example, move the rook here to d8 or something, there's a fine discovered check right here at knight f6. Yep. But more so than that, there's a beautiful epaulet mate with knight c7. Can you see it now? You play knight c7, you will be checking right on c7, and the queen is on Prie's on h1. So for example, just to show you real quick, mate. See, it says mate right there. So there's no way to save the rook, right? So for instance, rook b8 has two moves. Knight f6 can be played, or just simply knight c7. And then the queen on h1 gets picked up. So after queen takes b7, Prie simply resigned. And that is all for today. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you liking and subscribing the video, and we'll try to get better as we go on, and just talk about various different topics, subjects, in the world of chess.